Hello and welcome to the Counter Surveil podcast. I'm your host, Frank. I'm here with Nathan, Sledge, Thomas, and we're going to be talking about software bills of materials today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the supposed NSA breach, which looks like not an NSA breach at all. Talk about Apache vulnerability, some other fun stuff too. So to start out, hand it over to Nathan. Nathan, why don't you give us a little intro here?
I will do my best. I'm having my audio issues again because I'm using my phone. I should have checked in earlier and checked out my backup device. Hi, Nathan Hawk. Do stuff. Founding Team IoT Village, founding team over at BTLS Village, and Crazy Feedback.
Well, your audio was working for a minute there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having just a ton of issues with audio. Yeah, so anyway, let's just jump in on the SBOM stuff because I'm very frazzled this afternoon. I'm just trying to get my day back under me so we can move on. So what we're doing every week here is we're trying to provide some education to startups and stuff like that so we can see better security hygiene, better security practices, and just better products coming to market more responsibly. So in doing so, we chose SBOM this week for our little highlighted feature. So software bill of materials. Who am I going to be asking questions to about the origins of SBOM?
I think Sledge is a good person to start asking, but maybe Thomas would be better. Thomas, are you very familiar with software bill of materials?
I'm familiar with it, but I can't speak on the origins of it. I just know you should know what goes into your software. Kind of a principle.
Yep. Sledge, how about you? Are you familiar with the origins of SBOM?
I am not actually.
Looks like you're asking me, and I'm going to wing it and look up the answers to the question.
Yeah, I might look it up too.
The
Another
government
thing
said
for
so.
small businesses I wanted to bring up was that BOI compliance stuff that came out this January. But that's another conversation.
We can definitely run into that. So the answer to your question there is software bill of materials can be traced back to the early 2000s when the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the NTIA, introduced the idea of a software parts catalog. And then, did he disappear again?
Why can I not hear anybody?
Crowd strong. I'll say it right one day.
It will get done right eventually. Don't worry about it.
I'm just fixing my cam here. For some reason, my virtual background disappeared, and I certainly don't want people to see my messy room.
See, the thing about it is, it's the camera angles, right? You've got 3D printers that are covering everything else, and the mess is, it works great.
I like my downstairs office because I could show off the DEF CON badges and all that.
Yeah, just wait until I get this place set up. I have a couple of other things going around, but I found my DEF CON flag, and I was like, whatever. I'll drop that in here.
So we were talking a little bit about software bill of materials here, what its origins are. There's a big push recently. I believe CISA is behind it, pushing that every company gets SBOM integrated in with their product catalog and their integrations as far as software inventory, knowing not just what programs you've got, but the underlying software and software that your software's got, so to speak. Like when Log4j happened, a lot of people were like, well, good thing we don't run that, not realizing they ran a bunch of Java software that was using Log4j. So just as an example, and a preventative measure against supply chain attacks, knowing not just what software you've got, but the architecture your software is built on and the individual components is definitely a good thing, I would argue.
I'm not a huge fan of compliance measures and stuff like that, but this looks like a good idea because we could even pull up that meme again.
So
knowing what all your open source software that is being used inside the tools that you develop, all the libraries and stuff.
It's useful when implemented correctly. I know a lot of companies So it's like if you have help desk software, say you're using Jira or ServiceNow, usually SBOM is added as an additional module you got to pay for. It's not free. And then that does lookups in the database and finds like, hey, you've got this piece of software. This software, as far as we know, is built on these components and this software stack, and it kind of adds entries for those individual items. So I think it's a good idea. Nathan,
Yep.
What do you think? Nathan? We'll get back to Nathan. Wonderful. So some other cool stuff happened in the news recently. Just earlier today, I saw on LinkedIn a post claiming the NSA had been breached with 1.4 gigabytes of data leaked. So did a little snooping, found the breach, looked at it. Doesn't look like it's the NSA's data. Looks like a healthcare provider that's got a few people within their databases of information about people that they serve who have NSA.gov addresses. Got their entire dev environment rocked. And one of those companies that decided to use production data in their dev environment. So we've got records in there that should not have ever been put into a dev environment.
I'm seeing USDOJ.gov, .gov, and a bunch of others.
Yep, there's a lot of crap in that leak.
State.gov.
Yeah, it wasn't too hard to find, mind you. So walk you through how I figured out how to get the data. It was pretty simple. There was a screenshot in the article. I reverse imaged the screenshot, found the forum where the data was dumped. Just happened to already have an account on that forum, ironically enough, and then went and looked up the name of the person who did the leak, found the exact post, and then within there they linked to a Telegram channel. In that Telegram channel, they had attached the leaked data, and I pulled it down. Not exactly rocket science or needing a lot of thorough knowledge on open source intelligence there. It's kind of just following the cookie breadcrumb trail that was left. Yeah, but to claim that the NSA was breached and have it not necessarily be that at all is an interesting tactic. I wonder why this threat actor decided to go that route.
They weren't charging money for it?
No, it was free. It was not even like a unlock with credits kind of thing. They linked to their Telegram, and their Telegram they hosted the file.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm. So next,
NSA for FUD.
All the FUD, half the fat.
Yeah.
There was a recent Apache 0 day, which was another regression type vulnerability where something that had been patched out long ago, it got reincorporated back into the code, just like last week where they had one called actually regression with an H, but this one is specifically for Apache. Has nothing to do with that other exploit. Regression just meaning that code was reintroduced that was previously vulnerable.
They're calling it a 0 day, and from what I can tell, all it does is source code disclosure.
Yep.
So what that tells you is don't use hard-coded passwords.
It's true. And it's something people need to learn how to use secrets management better. HashiCorp Vault is a good alternative to hard coding passwords in anything. There's other ones out there too. That one's free, so I like it.
I still haven't seen a POC, but they're saying it could potentially leak source code.
I hear ya. I haven't seen a POC for it yet either, but the article that I read on it claimed that a POC had been dropped for it. We shall see if that actually comes to fruition or if it's even a workable POC or not just something that's going to crash an Apache server, which I have a strong suspicion it's going to be something that just crashes an Apache server.
And then the data shows up in an error message or something.
And then you can maybe map to the freaking place the logs are, some nonsense like that. Anyway, so this is another one where it might be just a little overblown in terms of the let's get the word out there and tell everybody there's another 0 day and go patch your stuff. When audio engineer, I don't know who did that, but sure,
Are we infiltrated?
perhaps somebody is sharing
It's
the link.
Nathan. I signed in on another device, and I wanted to see how everything was working.
Yes, we touched briefly on SBOM and then got derailed on NSA leak. That wasn't an NSA leak, and then moved on to Apache.
I was going to use Apache to get in.
That would be hilarious if they used that. So this is the article on the supposed 1.4 gigabytes of NSA data being leaked. It says email addresses, phone numbers, and government classified information exposed. Let's see if I can put this up on a monitor. I have to take my KVM and turn another. Should have been prepared for that already, but I wasn't. And I'm gonna
I need a
grab that
KVM.
and open a incognito window over here, and then I'm going to nuke my bookmarks toolbar because people don't need to see all my bookmarks. And yet it's still there. Screw it. Who cares if they can see my bookmarks toolbar? We're going to share this screen right here. Da, 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 da. Right. Can you guys see the screen all right here?
Yep.
Alrighty. So it says NSA 1.4 gigs of data leaked. Email addresses, phone numbers, and
1.4 gigs is massive.
It's not much. It is mostly JSON files, and there is a decent amount of data within those JSON files. There's also a Python code. It's definitely a dev environment that got leaked. So going through this here, what we're seeing, I hit the plus on the wrong screen. There we go. Is that after reporting a massive Twitter database leak today, cyberpress researchers, who obviously didn't even bother to pull down or open the zip file, discovered another sensitive data leak on a well-known data breach forum containing 1.4 gigs of classified NSA data. The NSA is a United States government agency responsible for global monitoring, collection, and processing of information. Not somebody you'd think would get breached too often. Threat actors claim the data was obtained from Acuity Inc. So it is a subset of another data breach, a company that works closely with the U.S. government and their allies. This breach raises national security concerns and highlights vulnerabilities within government contractors, cybersecurity measures. So if you were to say do a Google search for that name right there, put it in quotes, and then tell Google not to send you all the results, just the ones that match that on the next page, you'd come across this pretty quick where it is and how to get it. I looked through the data very briefly. Obviously, it's never wise to share a screen that would have actual leaked data on it because we would never want to disclose anybody's personal information, especially on a live podcast. But from looking through this, it does look like it is health notes from doctor's visits along with medications prescribed for a contractor that seems to be handling data of not just the NSA, but a lot of other companies as well. A lot of regular people also mixed in there. Just it's not good. It's never really great when these criminals leak this data. That's everybody's personal information. When it gets out there, it's not like it's going to get taken down very easily. It's out there for good. And
it kind of helps us in our jobs as pen testers because it goes into a database with usernames and passwords we can put into our lists and do stuff with.
And while that's useful to us, I would argue that also leaking what medication somebody is taking and what their doctor's notes are is not necessarily
right.
To many people.
That comment was mainly sarcasm.
You're talking to an autist here, sarcasm. But yeah, so this is another one where the hackers got access to the data, and these people decided that this was the way they were going to advertise that this third party got leaked. 1.4 gigabyte massive NSA data leaked online. looking through this, there's a few NSA.gov addresses in the data set in JSON files. The majority of this has nothing to do with the NSA or contractors. It's a freaking healthcare provider that had their data leaked and put online, people's confidential information put online. Not a fan of when threat actors do that. Not a fan of when threat actors do many things, mind you. But if they didn't, I probably wouldn't have a job. So there's that.
It's the cat and mouse game.
It's always going to be a cat and mouse game, unfortunately. So just when you think you've caught up, the game changes. So anybody want to talk anything about that one before we move on to the next topic?
That one's not that exciting.
Not really. You would think with a sensationalist headline like that, there'd be some good stuff in there. Unfortunately,
Where's the juice?
I know that healthcare is becoming a big target these days, and that's a big thing that's going on. A number of them, a little closer than I care to admit, are being targeted.
Since we have Ben on here, we could talk about DLP in this situation.
Yeah, Ben, how would data loss prevention help in a situation like this if data is getting exfiltrated from a company?
So, in terms of data leaving a company, depends on what DLP you have in place. But in this instance, you'd have something that was packet inspecting the network to see if there's anything like that that might be relevant, HPI or PII, personal information like that, that would trigger alerts in your DLP system where you would go and start hunting that down and trying to figure out where that's going. Good stuff.
And if somebody decided to try and take a list of social security numbers and confidential information and email it to somebody, would your typical DLP catch that?
Yes. So,
unless they zip it up on the compromised box.
So the thing about that is if you have a depending on if they password protected, our DLP, or if you, in my opinion, DLP should be set up that if there is an attempt to send an encrypted email or an encrypted file in an email, it won't send. It just won't do it. The system.
I'm thinking, like, what if somebody's got an actual shell to a C2 server and they try to pull it out? Would DLP catch that if they zipped it up?
Well, that's what your SSL inspection is for, right? You would probably, let's see. Now, that's a really good question.
But let's say they have got a cert on the box. They're doing DPAC inspection properly. What could be a preventative measure that the threat actor might have taken to throw a monkey wrench in them seeing that he's exfiltrating that data?
Well, that goes back to the encrypted zip file, right? But then you'd have to rely on other things to determine that there's a C2 connection somewhere. You've got network traffic inspection, things like that.
You'd have to make correlations.
Yeah, of course.
For the sake of argument, let's say the threat actor is not all that complicated. They're using Metasploit, and they're using your.
That's already setting off alarms.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is your endpoint detection system? Then you've got EDRs that should catch something like that. You've got detections that are all over the place. It depends on how loud this person is.
Let's pretend that they know how to use Unicorn along with Metasploit, and they at least got a shell on the system. Okay, and now that they're trying to send this data back to their command and control server, you've got deep packet inspection going on. Your endpoint might not have caught this. If your deep packet inspection catches it, say you've got an EDR product on the box that's compromised, what would your next step be as a SOC analyst? If you get an alert and you look into it and it does look like this kind of data is going out over the wire.
So the first thing that we would do is try and cut that connection. Kill the connection is first and foremost.
Isolate.
Try to stop that data flow. But also, if there's a device, again, back to him, isolate that device. So in whatever way you end up doing that, because it may be on a server. You can't take down a business server unless there's a legitimate business justification, right? One of the hardest things that I've had to deal with in my career so far is that the world can't stop for security, right? So depending on where it's coming from, if it is an endpoint, you isolate the endpoint and then try and figure out where the intrusion came in and where that C2 connection is, cut that off too. But if it's a server, it's cutting off that network connection to that server, and depending on how bad that breach is, how bad that intrusion is, you might have to kill the connections to that server or contain it or whatever.
You could also identify what port they're using for that connection and block that specific port
Sure, unless it's
by
a
itself.
commonly known port or commonly used port.
That's where it gets tricky. Like that's what Sliver uses. They can do stuff over HTTP and whatever. It's awesome. And like secure DNS and all that.
Yeah, I mean, post-exploitation frameworks. There's a lot of them out there. There's some custom stuff too. If your tools are all set up properly, do you think this would ever even happen to a box?
I can't.
We all want to say no, but we know it's
not ever no.
Not ever.
The answer's not ever no.
Well, you can never have 100% assurance that like you're not going to get breached if you're set up properly. It's more about reducing the threat model, right? So
the idea is
everything
assume you're going to be breached and prepare accordingly.
Well said. So as a blue teamer, if you were running a SOC or working in a SOC and you came across, say, a web shell on a web server, PHP web shell, for instance, what would your next step be? Say it's a company that you actually work for as opposed to MSSP.
Oh boy. So I would try and determine where it's going, why it's there. Because for us, well, I guess I would try and determine if it's something that has recently been connected to, where it's going and why it's going there. And then from there, I could take action on it.
So you wouldn't just necessarily follow a playbook. You would necessarily, like a lot of SOCs, you see they okay, this thing happened, follow this playbook step by step.
Sure.
There's definitely a bit of a need to be able to think outside the box, though, right? In this kind of situation,
sure.
Not necessarily you're going to have a playbook for everything you're ever going to run into. So kind of having a high level, knowing like, okay, we're going to block their access if we can. So if we're using an endpoint agent, maybe if it's not a server, that's important. Cut off the access to the system first, so that it can only communicate between, say, CrowdStrike or any other, and their main server, and no other systems. That's it.
So I've actually come across this scenario before, and since I had access to the server, I went in and downloaded the code and started looking at it, log in and see what all they've got, like do some forensic work in that regard. As the analysts were, doing everything you just said. But it was cool. So I got like actual bad guy shells in a little collection of mine.
It's important to stop the bleed before the further analysis happens, right? You don't want that data being infiltrated or that connection. The longer that connection,
We're all doing it all at the same time, so we just kind of like attacked it.
Well, that's
so if for instance it is a web server, right, instead of a personal developer's box or just a regular end user, and you notice this is happening. Say you don't want to block all access to the internet because it's a production server. Can you walk people through how they might, say, have a DBL and add some indicators to that?
Ooh.
Or would that not be the next step you would take?
I feel I'm getting real.
I can barely hear you.
Me?
No, Frank.
Yeah, okay.
Echo.
I can hear you just fine.
Excellent.
Man, my volume's all the way up. I can barely hear.
Anyways, crap out of his ears.
What was the question?
So I was asking if going and utilizing a DBL and adding the IP address that seems to be exfiltrating, they might be exfiltrating data too, or would that be a good next step in this kind of situation?
To stop that bleed, yes, is going into your ACL or DBLs and you block that access from the network. Ideally, if you have a cloud provider or somebody like that, I won't name names, but reach out to them, have them block that, or if you can through the firewalls or whatever.
You can usually do it on your external firewalls, and then based off of the traffic you've seen on that one shell,
Mhm.
write a signature to see if you see it anywhere else.
That's
with
a
your
good point.
SIMs and
So
IPS stuff.
oftentimes it's not just one place, right? You've got an
Yep.
indicator, could be part of a larger attack. So
Mhm.
based on the indicator, you should pivot on that, right? And then look
Mhm.
for other places that might be doing similar kind of things. Include them into an investigation. Very cool. All right. Sledge, let me have you ask a few questions now.
Me?
Yes, you. Couldn't be. Then who? Thomas.
Oh, I mean, I barely
on
heard
the
you. Did you
computer.
say me ask questions or you ask me questions?
I would like for you to ask Mr. Crowdstrong some questions while I go and dig through my show notes and find the next thing we're going to talk about.
All right, let's divot to the other point I wanted to talk about then, which is hacking resumes.
Based.
Point.
Let's do that.
So, the job market is really weird lately. I've gotten all the way up to like the last interviews multiple times, and then people on the inside say, oh, the budget's been stripped. We had to get rid of all our recs, yada, yada, yada.
Happens.
And I've had 20 people look at my resume over the last 6 months, and a lot of advice has come out of that.
Mhm.
And Thomas gave me some good advice, and so did Crowdstrong. But Thomas is the expert in like ATS and wording things, and I haven't actually sanitized my resume to use an example, but we can talk about some of the points, such as one of the big ones I resolved last night was we were talking about should I include my company on a resume? And we decided don't say founder, say manager. And from there, I ended up going with independent contractor, and
Why?
then switching up the wording on the bullet points
Why?
because there's lots of different reasons for that. One is you don't want to intimidate the hiring manager or threaten him with his job, and B, you don't want to make it sound like all your time is being wasted on your own thing because they're asking where your time is going.
Well, if you disclose that that is a thing, they now know that you have, like, when I was hired in my current organization, I had to disclose that I am the CISO of a nonprofit organization, right? So that's on my resume, but I also had to disclose that further past that point because relevant, you know. So I think it looks good that somebody has some kind of further drive in their lives other than just say the one job that they're doing or whatever, especially if you've started a business or something and it's, you know, successful enough to be able to put it on a resume, or you've, as I said, working in a nonprofit, or, you know, or doing something on the side, even side projects or things like that. I mean, I think that's important, especially understanding a wider attack surface from either side of the fence, really, and having tangible experience to do that, especially at such a high level. I think is I think that that gives cadence to a better hire. That's just me.
One of the arguments also was don't single yourself out with your LLC name or company name if it's not widely recognizable. Just call yourself an independent consultant or something.
So you're
But
down.
the other argument too is you don't want to leave that blank because you don't want to leave a gap from your last job until present.
Mhm.
So you fill it with something.
Mhm. It feels like you're downplaying, like in your instance, like I have a little bit more inside knowledge about your specific organization, but I feel like you're downplaying yourself if you take that route, right?
Well, I want to because I've been hit with the overqualified thing a lot.
That's
So
a
I'm trying a different
that's
route.
a fair point.
So I've made the argument that it very much depends on who the hiring manager is. So if you've got a referral who knows the hiring manager for a particular job that you're applying to, if you're working with a recruiter who's worked with that hiring manager, yield to their advice, because there are some places they're going to see any sort of, you know, high level leadership or entrepreneurship as a threat or something that makes you overqualified, and there are going to be some who want to see it. And of course, like, being the CISO of a nonprofit, depending on the organization you're working for, like if you're going to work for a finance company, you're probably going to have to disclose that. But as far as getting to the interview, like those are things to consider with, again, the requirements wherever you're applying and
Sure.
what that hiring manager is going to view as valuable. There's a lot of things I don't talk about on my resume, especially like my government service, because I'll be disqualified for it for no other reason than that some people don't like that part of the government.
Sure. That's fair.
Exactly.
Sledge, did you speaking of that, did you was that brought up to your recruiter that you're talking to?
I'm not talking to recruiters.
No.
Oh wait, maybe I am.
Yeah.
He has not seen the new resume,
Okay. All right. That's fine.
but whatever. I got an interview anyways.
That's fine.
Or
I just
another
figured
one.
it out.
Kind of my thing is I can go through my bullet points if you like, but I've gotten really good at getting interviews, Haven't gotten good at getting jobs or I'd be employed, but when it comes to getting my resume in front of a person, and understanding ATS systems, I made a lot of progress there.
So
I
2
have
points
tried-
there. I'm the same way, and I would say the economy is just really weird right now.
It
And
is.
B, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about ATS.
Right.
I would like to interject if I might, just for a second. I have found it useful in my career to, even if I'm not actively looking for another job, at least go take another interview a year just to get that experience and those kind of the questions they'd ask and the cadence of the different types of interviews for different people and things like that. I am doing my own thing now. I'm writing interview questions and trying to sort out what I want people to know in an interview and stuff like that. And a lot of that is my realm now. So I'm sure eventually it just progresses as it does. But I have found that has been extremely useful to me.
Well, and I
it's
say it
useful
also
for others
partially.
as well.
I say it partially as a disclaimer as well, because I never want to give anyone the impression, it's like if you take this cert, if you take this course, if you do this thing, you'll be able to get a job. It's it's not quite that simple. It is one part of the equation.
Another part of that equation is passion.
Yeah, I don't want it. Always gotta want it.
I hate
It's
that
like,
word.
oh, it's not just a job. I live this shit.
Oh man, that one gets me. It's like I've been programming since I was 13. When they ask me, "Is it your passion?" I'm all like, "It's my identity. Like,
Yeah,
it's just what I do, man."
this
I-
is a personality.
I was actually poking fun at one of my guys earlier. One of the guys that I'm training right now. He was. I sent him a link to the show where he could watch it, and he was like, "I don't think I could. I don't think you guys would be interesting enough while I'm at the gym or doing my cardio." I was like, "I need you to get better, man. Because like if you're not AirPodding this while you're doing pumps, I don't know what to tell you. But I need you to breathe this more."
Hey, we're not Darknet Diaries or David Bombal, but I think we had some pretty interesting conversations over
There
here.
we go. I enjoy it.
Absolutely.
So, Thomas, for the viewers, what is ATS?
So ATS is an applicant tracking system. Usually, well, different organizations will have a subscription to some sort of applicant tracking system that HR, talent acquisition uses largely to filter through resumes. It's just what it sounds like. But part of what it does is it takes the job description, it finds keywords in it, and it compares it to resumes to kind of sort through who might be the best fit. They can be tailored. They're not all created equal, and they have different ways that you can search through them. So some talent acquisition, depending on the requirements of the organization, they might be putting things in the filters, looking for not having job gaps or for not being a job hopper. They want people who have stayed in their various roles for at least a few years, any number of things. Oftentimes, if they're just scanning through resumes quickly, they're looking for keywords and they're looking to make sure that your last two job titles were something in line with the position that you're applying to.
And when you say keywords, you would want to tailor that to the job you're applying to as well, right?
Right. So if you look up Skill Syncer, which I guess I can type this in the comments, or you've got the thing where you type it, however you want to do it. But Skill Syncer or jobscan.co, those are applicant tracking systems that are pretty readily available, and they'll get you a good idea of where you stand with your resume and the jobs that you're applying to. Jobscan.co has a free tier. There are some limitations, but it'll let you do a few scans a month. And SkillSyncer gives a free year to veterans and to people with a .edu email address. So if you're a student about to get into the job market, that's a good one to use. You can run them through there, and it'll give you a rating, typically like a number from 0 to 100 of how well the
I have not
keywords on
seen
your
this
resume match
before.
with the
That's
job
pretty cool.
description.
So I watched this decent YouTube video, and I've also seen the same guy give the talk live a few times. Job hunting like a hacker, and there's a few cool takeaways from that. One of them, obviously, you should be tracking every job you apply to in like a spreadsheet or something, and you should be treating job hunting like a job itself.
It is.
One of the things that's a bit counterintuitive is he says you should make a list of the top 20 companies you want to work for, and then rather than apply to the ones you want to work for the most first, you should sort it and apply to the ones that you want to work for the least first out of your top 20. That way, when you get the resumes there, you get your resume in there, you get an interview, you can kind of use that interview as practice, get over any kind of issues you may have in terms of stuttering or not being able to articulate yourself well when asked certain types of questions, and use them as practice. So that way, when you are interviewed for your ideal job, you've already been interviewing and you're already in that flow, and you'll do really good at it, as opposed to it being the one where you might not. I thought that was pretty.
That's
Good
a really
advice.
good idea if you don't have other friends in the industry to give you mock interviews and drill you.
I would also like
Yeah.
a hot take here on interviews, if I might. I hate with a fiery passion stump the chump. So like when you get into an interview and they just ask you like textbook questions, don't ask me stuff I can Google. Ask me stuff about like how I would deal with something, or how I would, give me a real world scenario, or ask about my credentials, or what do I bring to a table, things like that. Anybody who is like it is rare that I will sit through an entire interview where somebody's just asking me textbook questions. That's just not my jam. I think that's
Unfortunately, in software, that's all it is.
yeah.
Every interview, and it's every hiring manager, it seems, has mastered a particular subset of information, and they just try to stump you on that thing. And then another interviewer, it's a different thing, So some of them it'll be databases, some of them will be architecture, some it'll be data structures and algorithms, and you're expected to. It's like you have to just look out and be an expert on what they happen to go into. But I mean, I was being asked some pretty advanced database questions on full stack engineer interviews where it's like I'm not a database admin, but that's what they wanted to disqualify you on. And I was talking to a CEO of a local security consultancy I was hoping to be able to work with. They're supposed to get back to me today. We shall see. But he said in his experience, most private sector jobs, they spend more time trying to prove what you don't know than what you do. They're less concerned with what you bring to the organization and more concerned with not having to do any training at all.
Yep.
How
They don't
common are
want to
gotcha
invest in your
questions in
professional
that
development.
realm?
How come what?
The
Cut
gotcha
out.
questions. Do they ever throw you like curveballs to see if you'll figure it out? Like there is no right or wrong answer?
Not so much. They're usually just very, not the sort of things you use on the day-to-day, or they're expecting you to memorize pretty arbitrary things.
Mm-hmm.
Like reciting code. I mean, worse than a coding test or a whiteboard interview, like literally expecting you to just recite code. And
Do they often give you the opportunity to look something up if you're maybe not sure on it on these kind of interviews, or is it always you need to like just sit at the keyboard, IDE up, and show them what you're doing without any reference materials?
that one's about 50-50. If it's a verbal interview like the ones I was talking about, for the most part, no. But if it's like a coding test where you take it in the web browser, sometimes they will, but there are so many restrictions on it that you almost don't want to, because if they think you've left the window for too long, like they'll track those sorts of things if they decide if they think it was suspicious or not. So, You know, because how
Like, dude,
are you
using a
supposed to
GPT to code, man? Can't
So,
have
yeah,
so
that.
how are you supposed to prove to them if you're looking at the docs or if you're looking at the answer kind of thing? So it can be difficult.
so I could see doing that in the middle of a code test. Sure, that's books, how you would do a thing, whatever. But like I guess Stump the Chump comes from the 1-to-1 or
Right.
group panel kind of discussion kind of deal. But if somebody's asking me how to, you know, I don't know, God, what's something that I wouldn't know off the top of my head? Something I can Google. Just for instance, the OSI model. If somebody's asking me the OSI model from the top of my head, and I don't know it, say for instance, if I can Google that, if that's not it is relevant to my job to understand the OSI model and how it works. But if it's something that I can kind of give a brief description on and keep going, as opposed to, I don't like being able to explain it like somebody is 12. I think is enough because that tells me that you understand it on a fundamental level and that you can teach it to somebody else on that fundamental level. But like, I don't know.
It drives me nuts when a hiring manager doing the few rounds of interviews don't know what they're talking about. An example would be they asked me how I would do an internal once I get access, and I went off and everybody on the phone call learned something, and then I get back saying I was overqualified. I was like, okay.
I've definitely had ones where there were questions that stumped me and then questions that I absolutely killed. And that didn't seem to do me any favors either. But I mean, it was.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So things like, you know, like with the database question I was asked, they're asking about like indexing, but they were asking me like how that technically works. And I found out the answer later, but it's like understanding the underlying data structures and algorithms of indexing databases is just not something I've ever needed to know in my career. Even having a degree in computer science, you know, being a full stack engineer for 7 years, I'm just not a database admin. It wasn't important to me. It's just like you index.
Mm-hmm.
That's that. And then in the same interview, they expected me to recite doing a REST API in React from memory, which I could say like, I mean, you can use like the JavaScript fetch function. I think they wanted me to talk about use effect token stuff, but they wanted me to actually like tell me what I type into the keyboard. They wanted me to actually recite the code like with all the parentheses and semicolons and everything, you know, from memory. And I'm like, and it was on my resume that I'd used React. The previous job I'd used Angular. It was one before that I used React. So I hadn't used it professionally in 2 years, but they still expected me to be able to recite that. Then they asked me, how does the internet work? How do you type, you know, a URL into your browser and then get back a web page? And being that, you know, I'm a full stack web dev who's studied a good bit of security, I walked through like DNS at various levels, TLS handshakes, some aspects of a bunch of different things. I definitely gave a very in-depth answer, covered CDNs, might have covered load balancing, static and dynamic applications, and like everything in between. Like basically went through architecture and the process and security, certificate authorities, and it was a good answer. But it's like that wasn't enough. They wanted all the other things, and it's just that like everything has been a ton of gotcha questions, and you just have to know everything, and they're just concerned with proving what you don't know. But that's been my like average experience, really.
I think if you get into an interview and if you don't know an answer, knowing how to find an answer is just as valuable as knowing
Yes.
an answer, in my opinion.
And I think
Knowing how
that's
to
more
Google
understood in
and what to
security
do
than
if you
in
can't find the
software.
answer on Google.
Right. Some of these questions wouldn't have taken, you know, literally more than 12 seconds to Google. And I know because I looked them up afterwards and it didn't take me but 12 seconds.
Sure.
Sometimes the answer to something requires a team collaborating together and spitballing ideas to figure out a solution to something. You can't just Google it. So that's always a good answer to a question.
Mm-hmm.
When I run those kind of questions, generally I will give a very high level, like how I go about solving it, even though I don't know the exact answer, and walk them through like step by step. Like, you know, if I didn't know how to do it, this is my methodology, this is how I'd figure it out. I wouldn't say I'd just Google it, but I'd be like, you know, from a high level, this is what I understand about the issue. This is, you know, the individual steps I would take and how I'd go about each part of the way in fixing or resolving an issue. Everybody's got their own little methodology, though. So
Yeah, sounds like the game
I
plan.
don't like when I go on an interview and the person who does the initial interview is a gatekeeper and they themselves don't know what they're looking for. I
Yeah.
remember there was a Twitter post not long ago about somebody who developed a framework that was very popular and had only been out for 2 years. And the interviewer wanted somebody with 10 years experience in the framework that the guy himself had built.
I saw that.
And it's like, how do you deal with a situation like that when the gatekeeper has a list of requirements that are pie in the sky kind of nonsense? I just kind of gloss over it and be like, yeah, I've got a lot of experience in that, especially when it's something that's like 2 years out that, and they want 10 years experience in.
I'm so smart. I was using this before. It was cool.
I also saw one post this cycle of applying to jobs. It was a large consulting firm, one of the big four. They wanted a developer with 20 years of experience in Git. Git has been around for 19 years.
It'd be like, I've been using Git since it was in the dev version before anybody else knew about it. I was one of the beta testers. I'm the only one you'll find who's got 20 years experience.
I wonder how they get these requirements for stuff like that.
I've heard some wonderful hypotheses.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones, is that they have someone that they want to replace, and they're just trying to find an exact fit for that person, that this unicorn that they can just plug in and run with.
Sure.
And which is pretty crazy, And in some cases, I think there's a little bit of, let's make the requirements ridiculous. Let's have 3 or 4 rounds of interviews so that we always have a reason not to hire someone, so that we can never get hit with some sort of like discrimination suit, some sort of prejudice thing. We'll always have some reason for saying they weren't qualified or were overqualified.
Overqualified's tough to hear, especially if you're going for a job. You don't necessarily want to make as much money as maybe the last job. You just want maybe a little bit less stress.
Just give me something.
Give it your all. And then I don't understand the whole you're overqualified, because if that means you're overqualified, it means you could do the job. Unless
I decided I wasn't overqualified when I applied to the job.
Sometimes they say overqualified because they feel like the pay isn't going to be satisfactory for you, and then you might get bored with the job. Those are some of the excuses I've heard.
Yeah, I don't understand why you wouldn't want somebody overqualified, because they could help teach other people.
Oh, and there's another one I've run into, the getting bored. It's like, well, it's like I've had a very exciting life. A lot of it I don't want to talk about in interviews, but like I want boring. I want stable. Like I don't need my job to provide me excitement. If I want excitement, I'll go snowboard. I'll go skateboard.
I'll go ride BMX.
I've had a plenty exciting life, but they don't generally seem to care what I say. I've been told multiple times, no, you'll get bored.
Yeah, I hate that. Well, anything else to say about this topic, or shall we move on?
Just a few other ones. So many years ago, I was actually an employment specialist. I specialized in helping people get jobs, coming specifically from a population of mentally ill people who had been out of the job market for a number of years and were trying to get back into it. And one of the ways I went about helping people get jobs was developing relationships within the community, reaching out to people and explaining, like, for instance, this person hasn't worked for 2 years, yes, but at the same time, they're very eager to get back into the workforce. They have all these years of experience, and you're going to benefit from all those years of experience that they already have. They might be a little rusty, and just kind of work around the rough edges, especially if you have like a gap in your resume. You have to have an already decided upon story on why that gap is going to exist. Even if it's not the absolute truth, you need to be able to explain it, at least to a recruiter, why you weren't working for a year, or why, like take care of a sick parent's a good one, or any kind of just go-to, and you got to stick to it and just be very comfortable answering these kind of questions when they're thrown at you. Interview prepping with a friend, somebody who's in the industry you're interested in working in, who can do a little mock interview with you, can be very helpful in getting the kinks out. They're going to try and ask you the questions they themselves might ask an applicant, even if they themselves can't hire you for a position right now. So if you do know somebody in the industry you're interested in working in, asking if they can do some interview prep with you can definitely a little role playing can be helpful, because then when you're faced with the questions, you're going to be a lot calmer. You're going to have already answered it, so it's going to be right up there in your mind.
Yep.
And I would argue one of the most beneficial things you can do before an interview is, take about 20 minutes, relax, and do a little breathing, listen to some music to calm yourself down, and don't stress it, because they can tell when you're stressed out or when you got a lot of anxiety in an interview. Generally, that doesn't read well. People are like, why is he so nervous? He seemed to know his stuff, but he was also nervous. Maybe there's something I'm missing. It's best to do your best to just calm yourself.
I usually do interviews like I'm talking to a guy at a bar, just talking shop.
If
Yeah.
it's too overly corporate, it's also not for me. I feel that in my soul.
Yeah, I mean, the environment's also important. So if you're going for a job, even if you might all have all the skills for the job, if you're more comfortable working in a startup over, say, a Fortune 100, that corporate environment could be a factor. Some people, don't want to work in corporate environments like that.
Too corporate and corporate are two different things, right? Not all Fortune 100s are like that. Like,
That's true.
my org is chill. For the most part, I've never heard we work hard and we play hard. If that's a bit much for me, but like, the people there are down to earth, and any good master is always a student, right? So the thing that I have learned, or one of the biggest takeaways that I have in my current position, is that I am reminded constantly that it's okay not to know all the things. I actually just reached 1 year on the 3rd at my current organization. So, and it's just a reminder that there is no way in 10 years to know all the things at that place, much less a year. But it makes me feel better that even though I don't know all the things, I also know that not everybody else knows all the things. And that's great, because collectively we've got a very grasp on what's going on. But there is no person that has taken and understands all of the things. And that helps me at least to remember that, hey, I too am human and I too have more to learn.
Yep.
And there's also an era or an era of learning in my organization, which is great. So
I've been doing this since 2009, and one of the biggest things I always say is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. If you're not learning something new every day, you're doing it wrong.
Yep. And even if you have the basics down, there are no two organizations across the board. Doesn't matter where on the Fortune, or if they're on the Fortune list, they are. No two companies are the same. It just doesn't happen. So attack surfaces are always going to be different. Methods of data storage and transmission and access, and who has and who doesn't, and public availability or not, or there's so many different variables of what companies are today, and it takes so long to really just dig in and understand something new anyway. And you learn all kinds of things. You can have a fantastic understanding of one giant corporate network, and then go to a new corporate network, and it can be, again, I've been at my current organization a year, and I'm still just really getting a good feel for it. So, like,
Harry's true. I've heard that one before. That comment.
The one about being a polite way to
Yeah.
Who am I? Where am I? And that started my search. Yeah, we are human, but the question is, who am I? Where am I? That started my search. There we are.
We should touch on the importance of networking too, like going to 2600 meetups, DC meetups, DEF CON. Meet people, make friends, get your circles put together. Because sometimes who you know is more important than what you know. Because all these friends you'll meet, they'll have ins at companies or whatever, and they could just be like, "Oh, give me your resume, I'll send it to the manager."
Or they
and then
might
you can bypass half the crap.
Yeah. One other thing I've heard, I wanted to get your opinion on. They say at the end of the interview, always have a good question or two. If they ask you, you have any more questions, have a couple prepared, and try and frame those questions in such a way that it has the interviewer thinking about you in that position. So, for instance, what would my day-to-day look like if I were working here? If or like ask very specific questions about the role that kind of put into the interviewer's mind that forces them to go off on a path of thinking where they're now having to envision you in that role and leave that as the last thing on the interview. That way, the last takeaway they have is thinking about you in that role. What do you guys think of that one?
I like to do that, but I also like to ask things like, what tools do you guys use? If it's a pen tester, I'll be like, do we get license keys for all these other tools? Kind of things like that.
So for blue teaming, I always like to ask something about a current or I'll go do research on whatever company I'm getting into. And if I can find anything on some kind of data breach or something they've disclosed, or was there some kind of data loss or device stolen or something like that, you can usually find something out there if you look hard enough. And I always love to hit them with that, because some of them can answer and some of them just can't.
They'll be like, "What are you talking about?
How did you guys deal with this back in?" You had this data breach because somebody had a stolen laptop from a car one day back in like 2018.
Well, and here's my concern: is in a position to not, be as picky as I could a few months ago. It's like I'll ask a question that they don't have an answer for.
Sure.
They don't like that, and I've definitely learned not to ask business questions to technical people. That has never ended well.
Yep.
If it's big enough,
it's not a good idea to try to upstage the person you're going to be working for.
No, and
I wasn't trying to.
It's never to get.
I'm never trying either.
It's how did you guys resolve this? What was how did you guys deal with it? That tells me a lot. If you can answer that question, it tells me a lot about how the organization is organized and how they would deal with a data breach or a theft or whatever the case may be. And if somebody's not there or they weren't there at the time, that's one thing. But if it's big enough to have gotten out to disclosure point, I feel like they should probably have some kind of idea what happened. Even if it's like the FBI came in and did things and, it was fine or whatever. We had Mandian or whoever come in and did their analysis or whatever, or, something that would kind of give me a little bit more grasp on eventually. Very, very early on in my career, I was in an ISSA meeting, and the presenter said something that stuck with me to this day. At the end of his speech, or at the end of his presentation, he said, there are two types of organizations, those who've been hacked and those who don't know it. And so that's kind of how I live my life, right? So if you ask them that and they're able to give you a solid answer, that gives you a little bit more cadence to what A, you'll be dealing with, but also B, that they are not just a cluster, for lack of a better,
relying on a silver bullet.
And
I agree with you entirely, by the way.
There is no silver bullet in security.
Just depending on where you are in your search and in the market, sometimes you have to be careful to not
Sure. You don't
give the
don't
appearance that you're outshining the master.
It's never to be the asshole. It's just, hey, this is a thing that got out. How was it dealt with? How did the team deal with this? Like a real world scenario, right?
Right. If I were the hiring manager, that's what I would want.
Speaking of outshining the manager, I actually had to dumb down my resume.
That's the first rule in the rules of power: never outshine the master.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good book.
But I've had interviews with hiring managers, especially in similar dev roles, where I ask them questions that, in order to answer them, they would have to know things that I would expect a senior dev to know. Or I've talked about my experience, things I've done, and they seem not to understand. And I understand if I'm speaking to someone who's not in that role, that I'm going to need to use more plain language, not use the same sort of jargon, but things that would really expect them to know. And that's always concerning.
Work under somebody as a senior, as them being a senior that didn't know that question. Would that feel weird, knowing more than him on the job?
As long as they sign my check, as long as my mortgage gets paid, I'm not the least bit concerned about it. And I have to say, the best places that I've worked were places where I worked with people, honestly, who were subject matter experts in various things.
Mhm.
And I worked with people who were just good, effective managers, leaders who facilitated training and took care of their people and could recognize who was the best person for whatever task and
Mhm.
help protect us from a lot of bureaucracy. I
Mhm.
worked with a lot of great people. The best ones were the ones who were willing to admit what they didn't know. And similarly, I could admit what I didn't know, and we would work together to come up with solutions. Somebody would become point on something, someone would be recognized as a subject matter expert internally. They would document things, we would all learn from it. I'd like to get back to that, but unfortunately, that's the exception.
That's also the importance of having a really tight-knit team where you can actually have those communications.
But the other thing
So
is,
I'm always looking for that within a company. Like, can we actually all talk together and figure stuff out together?
is the farther you go up the ladder, it seems, is the less technical people get, which happens in corporate. But even so, some managers don't necessarily come from the area that they are managing. Sometimes they are just managers. I have absolutely worked for managers who had no idea what I did.
Right.
They just knew I did it well. And sometimes they knew I did it well, and that was my detriment. But that is a failure on their part, not on mine. Happens.
Well, my main concern is when I'm interviewing with people who did have technical backgrounds and who
Sure.
I ostensibly should understand.
Sure. And I think as you and I are talking, and we haven't really had the chance to talk much, Thomas. It feels like your realm is a lot different from mine as a blue teamer, in terms of trying to get a job and trying to interview and things like that. So I'm interested to see the other side of that, because when I was young, before I got into security, I thought about being a programmer, and then I just didn't do that. I did go to
I'm
school.
I'm in a position now where it's a shame because I've been programming since I was 13. So at this rate, I've been programming for 20 years.
Mhm.
Professionally, I've only been a programmer for 7. There wasn't a lot of opportunities where I grew up. I had to go do other things for a while before I was a non-traditional student, went back to school, finished my degree, got work in my field.
Sure.
But the interviews have been so off the wall, so ridiculous.
Mhm.
And it's the longer my career goes on, the further removed they are from what I do on my day to day,
Mhm.
that it just doesn't seem like I would rather pivot into something that combines security.
Mhm.
And when I say that, I'd like to be a programmer for the rest of my life. Like that's what I do.
Mhm.
But if this is what I'm going to have to deal with culturally, then I would rather be doing DevOps, or I'd rather be doing security automation. That would actually be fun. As long as I'm using code, I'm fine.
Sure.
But I could do GRC. I could do anything in security. Like as long as I'm working with technology, I'm going to be fine. I'm just a programmer first and foremost because that's what I've been doing my whole life.
So as I'm sitting here and thinking about this, you have so many people that go through these boot camps and things, and I wonder if they get off the wall because you have so many people that go through these boot camps. And every person, in my experience, that I have trained to go through or that has gone through boot camp, I tell them to completely forget everything they learned and we start from scratch, because everything they learn is absolutely useless. Like it just isn't worth anything. And
I would say it depends on the role.
That's kind of my point with college too. By the time you graduate, everything you learned is already outdated.
Not necessarily. I mean, I learned things. Well, I guess I didn't learn anything that was useful here when I was in college, right? In my security life, genuinely nothing that I learned there was useful here. It has not been.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I learned in college, I'd already known because I was playing with LOIC and HOIC and 4chan, all that back in the day, right? So like tactics, tools, techniques, I'd already known it. I'd played with Wi-Fi pineapples and all that. I'd done. I mean, I think the only thing that really stuck with me that was of any kind of real interest past what I hadn't learned before was knowing how to program Cisco iOS devices. But even then, it doesn't happen much.
Oh, I remember those days.
So like,
Don't forget the enable.
yeah. Permit any guys. It's perfect.
Some more examples, and
Light on fire.
in line with this, it depends on the job.
Mhm.
So I never set out to be a web developer.
Mhm.
It just kind of happened. Things moved towards web application. It's a programming job. But when I was younger, I was studying C and C++. While I was in college, I was more interested in Rust and assembly, reverse engineering, that sort of thing. But I got into web development. We covered this much web development in my college curriculum, actually zero. And I had a job turn me down, multiple turn me down, saying I was too security focused. So because of my concurrent DevOps experience and my SysP, which I used to do software development for a security consultancy where it was normal for a software developer to have a SysP. And so what I'm hearing is that my experience with continuous integration, deploying and securing web applications, risk management, all these sorts of things is irrelevant to the job. But they still wanted to see that college degree where we covered no web development whatsoever. And then one of the technical interviews, they're asking me questions about skip lists. I've never implemented a skip list in my life, and we didn't cover it in college either.
Mhm.
But they wanted to see it. Has so little to do with what I do in the day-to-day. So it completely depends on the job. The boot camps, the ones that cover React, Angular, Vue.js, Node.js, those sorts of things. If you're trying to get into web application development, that's probably going to be more practical, more useful than the things you'll learn in college.
Yes.
But a lot of
and cheaper.
Right, but a lot of getting a degree, getting certifications, taking boot camps, if it doesn't have the HR clout, it's only going to get you so far. And I've learned that having a portfolio, having a college degree, having certifications, it's still not enough. None of these things alone are going to get you a job, which is why we're talking about these other things. But it concerns me that people spend all that time and money when the information's already available online.
Mm-hmm.
And having that boot camp doesn't seem to make a difference anyway.
I would argue that boot camp helps build your skills. Not necessarily something to brag about on a resume, but it helps you better at what you do.
For sure, but if you can do freecodecamp.org and get the same information for free, do that.
And then the only benefit from my perspective in terms of the college route would be the people you meet, lifelong friends in the industry when everybody graduates.
Right, and with that, you also have to compare it to the opportunity cost, putting 4 years and tens of thousands of dollars, when you could be working and earning money, and there are other ways to network. So unfortunately, a lot of jobs still require a college degree, even when it's not particularly relevant to the position.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing they get when they see that somebody's got a college degree is they know that person knows how to just follow directions, usually, that they can tell them to do a thing, that they'll generally do what they're told. A lot of the stereotypes, at least that I've seen, are that people who just have a high school degree and who are self-taught are too independent, and they're not good team players, and they're not able to just follow directions. I don't think neither of these things are true, mind you, but I think that's one of the prevailing mindsets that these people come from, is that if they've got a college degree, I can give them an assignment and they'll work on the assignment and turn it in just like homework, as opposed to this other guy I could hire. Yeah, he might figure it out, but I don't know if he'll work well with the team or be able to work in a group.
The best justification I've heard, and I don't agree with it, but is that it proves that they can stick to a long-term goal. And from my position, I'm thinking, aren't there much less expensive, more economical ways to prove that?
Right.
Like working a job for a few years, even if it's not in the same field.
I guess that's the way the old way of things. I know that business now is getting more and more to the point where they don't care about degrees, and they care more about skills.
Correct. One sec, I got to deal with dogs.
But I think that's kind of coming with the future. And I've had both types of managers where that my college degree mattered, but now I don't even put any of that. None of my schooling goes on my resume anymore. It just doesn't matter. I'm so far in my career, nobody cares.
Right. Unfortunately, in my particular field, it seems to still matter.
Mm-hmm.
Not for the largest organizations. They've dropped degree requirements pretty much across the board, except for certain research positions. But a lot of medium-sized and small companies still seem to care.
So you said you've been a programmer for 7 years. You worked. How long were you in the service?
I want to talk about that here.
Oh, okay. All right. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I was just trying to figure out how long your career has been. I guess I should ask.
Right. So I've been programming for 20 years, if you include me just like learning on my own, but I've been a professional developer for 7 years,
Okay.
and I've been in IT total for well over 10 years.
That's the answer. That's what I was
Right.
Have you ever been on a project where it was so badly designed from the ground up that the only way to fix it would be to rebuild it from scratch?
Yes. You don't always get to make that decision though.
Right. How do you address when you're in a situation as a programmer where the thing that you're supporting or that you're adding code onto has a faulty foundation, so to speak, that it's not built the right way, or it's using the wrong set of tools or languages, or it's not well, but you still are going to be given tasks and told to code for it. Do you generally just keep your head down and do as you're told, or do you ever raise these kind of concerns? And if you have, has it worked out well?
Well, this probably isn't going to do me any favors with any hiring managers watching this, but it largely depends on the culture of the organization. So I've worked with some organizations where, like the first company I worked with in this capacity, it was great. Everyone worked together. It was a very flat hierarchy. We didn't even have daily scrums or anything. Everyone just was in constant communication, but in a way that was effective. They weren't distracting each other. They were working together on things. I've never worked anywhere else where it was so natural. And in that place, if something clearly wasn't working, we would discuss it. And being that we had a large group of people who were very realistic about the capabilities and limitations of our technology, we'd get on the same page and we'd pivot. And that's what being agile is all about. A lot of companies like to talk about doing agile, but none of them want to be agile. Completely different things. It's not about following strict processes. It's about doing what works for your organization.
That's extremely prevalent, being like agile, like they'll incorporate some Scrum stuff, they'll incorporate some agile project management, but there's, I think, a lot more shops that are agile like than actually agile.
And I've worked at places that do daily scrums, and I'm not calling out particular ones. I've worked at several different places at this point, but I've worked at ones that did daily scrums, and they weren't all on the same page. Or if you didn't have a certain amount of tenure, if you didn't have an advanced degree, your opinion didn't matter. At one place, I counted over 10 times that I made recommendations that were immediately discredited and disregarded. But a month or two later, somebody with an advanced degree would make the same observation, and we did that thing.
I always chalk that up to who's, what in management.
Right. But all that to say, it completely depends on the organization. There are some organizations where they don't give me any choice but to just do as I was told. There are some organizations where we talk, we get on the same page, we make a decision. And, there have also been times that I've just been wrong and I failed. To be perfectly frank, at this point in my career, I've definitely had a long enough tenure to make some mistakes on my own.
Sure.
But at least I can admit when I did.
When you do make a mistake, do you think it's important to own up to it?
Absolutely. Like, you can't waste time on that sort of thing.
Just get over it, move on.
And that's the thing. Some people, they don't want to admit they were wrong and they try to force the solution. And sometimes I just have to look at it and just like, I definitely could have done that better. And
taking ownership when you make a mistake is a good way also to show maturity.
That's never paid off for me, but I've had to do it.
I would also say being the first to make your mistake known before somebody else does.
Right.
Absolutely. Like,
I
think we've all made mistakes, right? It's how you handle that and how you move forward and what you learn from it. I remember when I was doing a pen test once on an internal sledge, I was doing some ARP poisoning and forgot to forward the gateway. So ended up knocking all the traffic on the network to have no route out to the internet, and they had to reboot all the switches as a result. Pretty stupid mistake, mind you, but we learn from our mistakes, right? We don't keep making the same ones. And I think a lot of these people are so obsessed with perfection and not willing to admit when they've made mistakes, at least publicly, that we end up with a culture where everybody thinks that everybody else is perfect, and they're unwilling to ask questions and learn because they think that they'll be seen as weak if they expose the fact that they might not know something somebody else knows. What the heck?
So from
Sorry.
my end of thing, I've heard Agile and Scrum a lot in my career. I have no idea what they are. Can you give me a kind of a I am 12 and what is this?
So Agile comes from a manifesto for agile software development, often just shortened to the Agile Manifesto. It was a significant group of developers. I forget the exact number, but it was well over a dozen that got together, decided that there were certain things that they prioritized. And I'll pull it up now and read from it because it's actually very to the point. So if you go to agilemanifesto.org, you can see it, especially if you'd like to pull it up. But it simply says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more.
Okay.
And they have the 12
Yeah,
principles
they're
of
in kind of a larger font. I see. All right.
right, and then they have the principles. They have signatories you can review, but there are processes that people follow, organizations follow, that kind of fall in line with Agile. One of the guys on here was a big proponent of taking Scrum over
Oh yeah, Scrum and Agile.
here and adapting it to software. So these processes like Scrum and Kanban were used in organizations. I know Kanban was used in a Japanese automobile manufacturer.
I've
I
been
can't
calling
remember.
it Kanban for so long. It's Kanban?
Yeah.
Oh my
me
God, I
too.
feel so ignorant.
Don't listen to me. Don't listen to me. I could be wrong. But in any case, there are people who are better at marketing who basically sell Agile. And Dave Thomas, not Wendy's Dave Thomas, but Pragmatic Dave Thomas from this, he's done a presentation on how organizations need to stop doing Agile and start being Agile. There
There you go.
there shouldn't be certifications in Agile that you get certified and following a process that isn't tailored to your organization and saying that you're being Agile or doing Agile. That was never the point. The point was also not that you shouldn't document things, that you shouldn't negotiate contracts. And it's a silly thing. I've seen a lot of organizations use Agile as an excuse to not document things. They're so concerned with having a sprint and getting these features out that they're not documenting anything. I think Agile development should start with documentation. You're making a change, write it down. And I can't say that in interviews because there are a lot of hiring managers who disagree and they don't want to document anything and they don't want that to be a part of their culture and they don't want someone to die on that hill. And I won't necessarily. I just think it's important. And in the same way, no one would look at this in business and say customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So let's just not negotiate contracts. You absolutely have to negotiate contracts, but for some reason they do this with the documentation one. So some of the things that people call Agile and they try to use to do Agile are things like Kanban and Scrum are big ones. Kanban is basically a process where you have a list of, and I'm oversimplifying it, but you have a list of things that you need to get done, a number of tasks that are broken down on an individual level to where they might be able to get done within a few days. You try to break them down as much as you can. Sometimes you just can't do that. And you basically do triage. You say what needs to be done. You prioritize them. And then the next thing that needs to be done goes into the pipeline. And that individual tasked with that thing or the group that's tasked with that thing works on that until it's done. And then they move to the next thing. It's just a pipeline. I think it works great, especially for small organizations that have a lot of things to do. And there's no way you're going to get them all done. And you try to make timeline estimates. You try to come up with deadlines, but really you have a fire hose of things to get done and you're just doing what you can. Scrum is more, you're breaking tasks down, you're assigning point values to them, you're trying to estimate what you could get done within a sprint, which is usually like 2 weeks. And you'll have daily Scrum meetings, which I also think are great, where you'll come together. Shouldn't be more than 15 minutes for a small team, though often they run long, and of course that's kind of defeats the purpose. But it's just for everyone to say, here's what I did yesterday, here's what I did today, here's what I'm stuck on, If you have any blockers, somebody, you'll try to work together to get unblocked, but that's a chance for you to discuss those things daily and you move on. And the goal is to try and get a certain amount of points done within that interval. Points aren't supposed to be estimates of time, but functionally that's kind of what they end up being. I think sometimes people spend too much time coming up with point values for things, but I digress. These things can be very useful tools, but the idea that following a strict set of processes that weren't tailored to your organization is going to make you more agile is completely fallacious. You need to do what works best for your organization, for the situation that your team's dealing with, for your team and how they work together. Like that's being agile.
Right on.
Falling asleep with all this Scrum and Agile.
So
Thank you for explaining that to me. That
That's
makes a
my
lot more
fault.
sense.
I'm putting him to sleep.
No. That was very useful for me. Now I understand it. As I said, I've heard it a lot in my career. I just didn't know. Had no idea. So thank you for the
It's very big in software. People become certified Scrum Masters and make whole careers in just that.
I call them scrum bags, but yeah.
There you go.
So,
Love that.
just joking a little, but it came up with this article. I thought, well, not really article, but it's pretty decent. It's talking about people shitting on Agile and Scrum for the most part, but
Yeah.
I think there's some good stuff in it about how building complex software is a social problem. For instance, there at the bottom, they have people, talking about a lot of the same things you've brought up here, and why Agile doesn't necessarily work, or why Scrum doesn't work. These different types of project management for coding, the downfalls of it being more about surveillance than actually like getting stuff done. It's about like, in your opinion, when you have a team of developers who are working well together, what's the best project management framework for them to be using? Like, what's the best methodology for them to keep in touch with one another, make sure they're on the same page, and all work on stuff so that they get to the place they need to be and get the product out?
Well, again, and I'm not saying this is a cop out. I really mean it. You have to consider the organization. You have to do what's best for your organization. I do think that for small teams that are overwhelmed, nothing beats Kanban, because it's like, just what's the next highest priority? Let's work together and get it done. Sometimes that's just the most practical thing to do. At some point, it might just be, we have more to get done than we can do with our current staffing, and we need to accept the business costs, or we need to adjust our timeline. Often organizations are reluctant to do that, but sometimes you have no choice. I think daily scrums are great in any situation if they're done well. Some places they'll drag them out. They'll become 30-minute meetings, hour-long meetings. If you do just a quick, get everybody together, what are you doing today? And small enough teams, you can't do this with like an organization of 100 people. You have to do it with like your, 5 to 10 person team. Be quick. What's everyone working on? And if you do it right, you eliminate the need for a bunch of other hour-long meetings, because everyone knows what everyone's working on. So there are certain things I think work best in all situations. There are certain things where you really need to tailor it to your team. And but it really does depend on the team. Another thing that's kind of a tangent, but Agile also requires that you work with your customers, you work with the users. If you're in a position where the people who are developing aren't able to communicate with the end users, then you're not really going to be in a position to be doing Agile the way that the Agile Manifesto is talking about doing it. So you need to come up with a way to like conduct some sort of user surveys or something to inform the organization. And then again, the timeline of how you do that could influence how you decide the structure, whether you're doing Kanban, Scrum, or something else entirely. That feedback cycle could be a factor in that. I've noticed a lot of places they talk about doing Agile and they issue like waterfall model or Scrum model, spiral model. I like the spiral model. If you look up the spiral model for software development life cycles, it's like you document things and you design things and then you develop things and then you test things and you do it over and over again. There's more to it than that. But Agile, that's essentially what you're doing within a sprint, within a development cycle. And if you find that you look at something like this and it's like, okay, we're making iterations and you're not developing it into a final product. It's really more like a circle than a spiral. You're continuously iterating something that's out there, like a web application, something like a Twitter or a Facebook or an Instagram, where they're constantly making improvements. But if you really look at that and say, are we doing all these things? Because we need to be testing, and I know there's continuous integration that's a part of it. But we need to be documenting things. We need to be designing things.
Continuous integration. What are your thoughts on CI/CD pipelines and integrating code auditing tools into them?
It's pretty much something you just have to do now. And I took it for granted when I was at this organization I was way in the past, where everyone just worked together, that I was like, why do you need a dedicated person for that or role? But one, if you're using things like Kubernetes, there's a serious learning curve to that. And so it completely makes sense to have a dedicated person to that. And two, a lot of times, because developers are incentivized to develop features, they're not focused on quality assurance. They're not focused on security. They're not focused on integration and deployment. It starts to make sense with a certain size of organization and a certain culture to have dedicated personnel for those things. So, but the thing is, even with linting static analysis tools, some dynamic analysis tools in the pipeline, and automating everything, you're not going to catch everything. So it's also not an excuse to, the unit tests aren't going to get run if they aren't written, right? So you still have to look at this life cycle and say, are we actually doing all these things? And if you're not able to do them within a 2-week cycle, you might have to make that a 3-week or a 4-week cycle. Like, you have to deploy good software.
Right.
And I guess that's what I was getting at with that bit of a tangent, that if you look at what should be included in a software development lifecycle, you have to ask yourself at some point, are all these things getting done? And sometimes automating the integration and deployment is really helpful. It's really nice, but you're not going to catch everything in the same way that you can't just run, OWASP mass, OWASP zap, and, call it a day. Like, you can't just run SonarQube and call it a day. Like, at some point you have to do code reviews. At some point you have to write more refined tests. You have to make sure that you're identifying all the edge cases as the code changes. Make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. And at some point you have to do actual dedicated web application penetration tests.
Excellent. Passing it back over to the offense and defense guys over here, both Sledge and Strong. I'm just gonna say Strong. Is that work?
It's easier just to say Strong.
Messing it up.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right. So, what takeaways, Thomas, do you think offensive and defensive teams can take from the way that coding teams work together on projects?
It's difficult for me to say, because as much as I've studied security on my own time, and I've had security roles where I was like a cyber analyst or participated in audits, but I've never worked in a bona fide SOC. So it's hard for me to say too particularly. It depends on your tasking. I think communication is important. I do think teams should get together every day and talk about what they're working on and what they need help with. But again, it needs to be brief, and it needs to be in a small enough unit. So if your organization isn't broken down into teams where they're like, groups of 5, or at least down to level of groups of 10, like I would say that's a problem. Sometimes a hierarchy can be too flat, and it can make sense, but for at least the purposes of a daily scrum, breaking people up and saying, down and saying like, hey, this is your group, this is your group, this is your group. And at least within these little groups, even if they serve no other purpose, just having that group talk about what they're doing every day and reporting it up is useful.
And it also depends on how they have their Scrum model laid out. Like, do they include security testing within the development cycle? Because if they do, then you need to have constant communication with your security guys.
So when you're doing Scrum, generally everything's supposed to be broken. Everything's supposed to have a task. And often that's not done. Often, you have to look at the incentive structure of the organization. And this decision's made at a much higher level. And there's, again, things where it's like, if I talk about this in an interview, it's not always a good look. Having opinions on how people at the director level and higher should be running things, depending on the structure of the organization. But it comes down to the incentive structure. And if the software developers are only incentivized to develop features, then they're not going to work with the security team. If the IT team is, trying to maintain this zero trust environment, and of course, some affordances might need to be made for developers, but the developers, instead of communicating with IT to resolve these issues, is circumventing security features and using their own
Shadow IT.
devices to get work done. Not that I've seen this before. I absolutely have. Those are things you have to look at. That it's governance, risk management, and compliance. I know there are often jokes about this being like a less technical thing and it's put down, but it's very, very important. Governance is in part making sure that your organization is on the same page about what they need to be doing. And if that's not coming from leadership, then you honestly can't expect that of your developers in an organization of a certain size. If your paycheck and you getting your mortgage or your rent paid is based around just getting features out, and no one's working to make sure that the teams are actually communicating with each other, then it's not going to happen until it's too late.
Yep.
Yeah.
What was it? Functionality over security, or expediency over
function.
security?
And it's a shame too, because like one of the companies I worked with, it was far and away the best IT team I've ever worked with. But because the incentive structure wasn't there, the developers didn't work with them. It was such a shame. They were above and beyond anything I needed done. It was always done by COB the next day. They had a lot to do. They were in constant communication with us. They were extremely professional, and unfortunately, it still wasn't enough because that culture wasn't there. That directive wasn't there. It wasn't enforced. But
Yep.
I mean, I don't want to tell security teams necessarily how they should run themselves. I'll say those are some things that I think are valuable. I think it's very important to have some level of peer leadership and try to get buy-in from people at your level within other parts of the organizations. But at the end of the day, some decisions they might just be above your level, and you can only do the best that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
That is very well said. You can always just do the best you can do. That's all you can ever expect out of anybody, really, who you're working with.
Best effort.
Best effort.
And if you don't
man.
get a good night's rest,
Give
you
it
might
your
not be able to
best.
do that either. Learn that the hard way.
I wanted to ask another question in regards to software development. From a security standpoint, I do agree with you that one of the reasons a lot of the issues that we see in bad code happens to be the incentive structure around what's going to be prioritized for coders, these features rather than fixing stuff. How do you fix it? From if you were the head of an organization, manager level instead of programmer, and you had to make the decisions that would lead to people who are in your current position having a better way of doing things, where you're not only going to write secure code, but like what changes do you think are most important there in order to be made from the top down, so that the code that ends up in production is not only solid and secure, but also meets all the criteria and is what the customer wants?
Well, in some ways, it's way easier said than done. The most important thing you can do is make sure that the incentive structure is there, and even that's going to have to be a risk calculation. To me, everything is risk management. And again, this isn't me speaking as a software developer. This is me speaking as someone who had a background in things that were retail, physical security, other things where the common thread of everything I did was risk management. So whether you're working in physical security, whether you're working in insurance, whether it's a business decision or a software decision, everything comes down to risk management. From a business standpoint, you have to, well, I've said this before about security. You have to have something to secure in the first place. If you don't have a viable business, if the business isn't making money, then it doesn't make any sense to have security. You have to have something to secure in the first place. So your first priority is always going to be whatever pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
Then is protecting that. And so while you can't always have an actuarial analysis of every decision you make, you can look at case studies and you can look at plain facts. Like, you don't just have to look at the target reach to understand it's not if, it's when. It's never going to be perfect. And then it becomes like an insurance question. It is how much, and it's, I know this sounds like a cop out, but it really, really depends on the organizations. I've looked at some where it was enough overhead where it was like, oh, we could definitely afford to spend, at least of a quarter of our time just doing like QA and security. There are organizations where it makes sense for them to have dedicated QA and security teams. And unfortunately, even that at that point, some of them don't do it. But ultimately, it's about making sure the bills get paid first and then saying, okay, how much are we willing to allocate to securing what we have, and then developing an incentive structure to ensure that that is done.
And then sometimes having that insurance is degrading to the security infrastructure of the company as well, because they'll say, hey, we don't need to do XYZ, we got insurance. We don't need to focus on our security in depth and all that.
Well, and insurance can't cover reputational risk, but I'm saying it functions similarly to insurance. This is a cost. We're paying this. It's not making us money, but we're anticipating that this is going to make us more secure and save us money in the long run. And again, I'm not an actuary, and you can't do an actuarial analysis for all of these things. It mostly comes down to the organization. But when I worked with an organization that did NIST cybersecurity framework alignments of small businesses, we'd look at them and say, it's not if, but when. If this thing happens, if you suffer a ransomware attack, you look at the number of businesses that go out of business. I haven't looked up the numbers recently, but it's most small businesses don't recover. So I can't give you the exact percentage off the top of my head. But you need to make sure that you have regular backups, air gapped, different locations, and that you can recover from them. And you tabletop these things, but then you rehearse them. Because if you don't, we can't even tell you how many man hours is this going to cost you? What's going to be the actual dollar amount of that? How much business is that going to cost you? But you start looking at things like, oh, it's going to take us a day. We're going to be offline for a day or two. You can actually say how much that's going to cost you in man hours. And how many days you're not able, you don't have any income as an organization effectively. You can start putting numbers to things.
CDK is an excellent example of that, right? We all know about the CDK hack that happened recently, back on the 12th or 13th of last month, I think it was. So they got hit, and I guess they didn't do their due diligence because their backups got hit too. So their backup data center got hit. And then, so they thought they were going to be back up in a day. And I don't think they're actually online now. If they are, they have just come back online. I haven't actually looked at updates for that that have come out publicly yet. But man, that was a mess. But it's also a fantastic example of why you have to make sure that you have air gap backups and you have your disaster recovery plans and everything else. Because
so there are certain things like this, like the OWASP top 10 for software development, where you can make sure that you're doing it. And as an organization, you can say, can we afford to set aside the time to make sure that this is done? How much time can we set aside? There are similar considerations like the, I can't remember it right now. I'm drawing a blank. It was the CIS top 20, or is the top 18 now? Mm-hmm. In any case, there are things that you can objectively say, are we doing these things or not? And that's already a lot within itself. But unfortunately, when I'm saying this, as much as I'm making generalizations, because it's hard to know without looking at the particular organization, it's asking those questions in the first place. It's even trying to develop those incentive structures in the first place, because my experience has been that most organizations don't do it. Mm-hmm. From my experience and from the people I've talked to, from surveys I've read. And that's really what I want to get at. I don't want to pretend that I have this perfect solution that every organization can implement. But I will say, as an organization, once you get to a point where you're able to keep the lights on, you're able to keep your people fed, and then you have enough overhead that you can commit time to ensuring that you're following the OWASP top 10 and the CIS top 18, do that.
Yep.
And make sure those incentive structures are in place. Make sure that you have some form of governance. And from there, you can iterate, you can improve, you can make an actuarial analysis if you want to, I'm sure. But you could do 27,001 and SOC 2 type 2 and all that stuff, but none of that matters until you get to that point. And that's the point that a lot of organizations just, they don't even have that.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Just as devil's advocate here, isn't it easier to code things securely from the beginning rather than put in security later?
Yes, but I want to address a couple comments if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm seeing a couple comments. I'm not trying to call anyone out here, but I'm seeing things like, so it's all money and greed. Rent isn't cheap. Mortgages aren't cheap. Food isn't cheap. You have to be able to pay your people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not here to speak necessarily on like particular economic systems or whatever, but the reality is you have to be able to feed your people. So, someone says be less greedy. It's like
It's not that simple.
Yeah,
it's
not.
it's making a risk analysis, right? Like, so obviously you want to be profitable, you want to make your shareholders happy, you want to make sure people are getting fed, but you also have to secure what you have. And people often, they lose sight of that. And more than just greed, because it's like, be less greedy. It's like, I'd like to tell that to the adversary because they're just doing it, but they're being greedy. Yeah, you're not wrong, but they have to make money for their shareholders. They have to make money for their people. And it's more about the failure to recognize the risks. I think that is the problem, because like, of course, everyone wants to make money, but it's like, you also have to realize what kind of threat there is. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not a problem until it is a problem. I especially working in areas of with physical security, there are a lot of people who left their doors unlocked until something happened,
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother would tell me stories about back in the day when, they knew people in the community and they felt safe and they could leave their doors unlocked. And I'm like, and yet they had stories of heinous, violent crimes that will get us demonetized if I talk about here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, you absolutely couldn't have done that. You're lucky that you got away with it as much as you did. The difference is the news didn't travel as fast and you didn't understand the risk that you were taking on. Now that you understand the risk, because news travels so fast, you understand I should probably lock my doors. I should probably change my passwords every so often and you not reuse the same passwords. I should probably use a password manager, and you start learning these lessons and incorporating them. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations, it's a similar thing where it's until it affects them, their organization, or them personally, it's hard to, prioritize every risk that you haven't actually experienced, because there are so many risks we run into and so many threats. And until it becomes real to you, it's almost overwhelming to try and address it all.
They got to feel the pain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I love on that other comment, others are trying to secure their loved ones and country, et cetera. It's like, yes, if you don't have physical security, you don't have security. I will say it every podcast if I need to. People forget that. What was the original question? I'm sorry, I went on a tangent.
I was asking originally about what you would do if you were in charge to make things better in terms of software development, at least for one company. So this is an example. Well, you've more than adequately answered that question. I want to move on a little bit and just make a little call out here. If anybody who's in the audience is having any issues going through a hard time, this field particularly is very stressful for a lot of people. Amanda Berlin runs this organization, Mental Health Hackers. There are some good resources and links on this page right here. So if you feel the need and need somebody to reach out to, if you're going through a hard time, these are some good people to help fix that need. They also have some, when you're at a conference, sometimes they'll have a booth, they'll be there. If you're getting overwhelmed, whatever the case may be, just for anybody who may need it, this is some good resources right here. It's always important to prioritize your mental health and well-being over anything else in your life. Just personal opinion, really, but I think we have the 3-2-1 rule at conferences for a reason. You got to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other stuff.
What's the 3-2-1 rule for those of us who don't know?
Sledge, I'm gonna
What is
call
it?
you out. What's the
3
3, 2, 1?
hours of sleep. I forget what the 2 is, and then 1 shower.
Meals.
Like that.
Meals.
Okay, all right.
2 meals.
Oh yeah,
a
2
day
meals, 1 shower, 3 hours of sleep.
Okay, all right.
minimum. A minimum. A
I
lot
guess
of us
I
have made
haven't
the
been
mistake
to
of not
conferences.
following those very bare minimum rules and had a bad time as a result.
Yeah.
Present company included.
I guess I have not been to enough conferences.
There should be
Conferences can
another
be
rule.
pretty
Wear
intense
deodorant.
when they're multi-day conferences and you're, around a bunch of interesting people and a lot of excitement and stuff going on. You could,
It's real easy to get lost in all of that.
It's like, holy shit, it's 6 in the morning already? Crap.
I actually think that's happened with you more than once, Sledge.
Yeah, all the time.
It's you ever message Sledge at a conference? It's like, hey, where are you? He's like, I'm over here. You start walking over there. You get there. He's like, hey, where are you? I'm there. It's like, oh, I'm over somewhere else. So dude is literally
And
like.
usually this
off the
happens at
track
his
now.
house.
I can't go 5 feet at DEF CON without somebody talking to me. Like, oh, you're that guy. I'm like, yeah, I guess I am. What's up?
He is that guy. The guy. I'm going to give a little high-level overview of some InfoSec stories in the news. If you guys want to interrupt me on any of these and talk about them more, feel free. This week we saw Alabama State Department of Education suffer a data breach following a blocked attack. They did stop a ransomware attack on June 17th, but some data was accessed and services disrupted. Parents and education employees were advised to monitor their credit, as well as students being advised to keep an eye on their social security numbers being used for fraud schemes. Roll20, for you D&D nerds like me out there, is a very popular online platform for those of us who play D&D. And they had a data breach on June 29th where a hacker accessed the administrative website for about an hour. The breach potentially exposed users' personal identifiable information, including names, email addresses, partial credit cards, thankfully, so you might not have to rotate your credit card, and also IP addresses. The Apache Foundation fixed a source code disclosure flaw in Apache. This was that vulnerability we talked about, 2024-39884, related to source code disclosure. Vulnerability could lead to unauthorized access and remote code execution. Polyfill.io had a supply chain attack. They have a pretty deep write-up on Census about how this was a supply chain attack around a JavaScript library that was implemented in the project. Off to Thomas. How often do you ever see developers putting in, say, a JavaScript dependency and maybe just spelling things one off and ending up pulling out one of these malicious libraries? You ever encountered this in your line of work?
I don't think I have. I think the biggest issues have just been things getting deployed and things going out of date, which goes back to the software bill of materials thing that you were originally talking about. I know there are some issues with kind of CDN, supply chain exploitation, but most of what I've seen is just things get deployed and they don't get updated.
That's very common. What are some good solutions for patch management when it comes to software as opposed to our traditional like Windows environment running a patch management software?
One of the cool things about a lot of these modern web frameworks and libraries is you have things like NPM, Node Package Manager, and NuGet Package Manager. I might be saying that wrong, but it's in the .NET ecosystem. And it's the one I use the most, so I should know how to pronounce it, but I don't. And they let you know all of the versions so that you can update them, and they'll let you know if things are out of date. They'll let you know if they're tracking any vulnerabilities when you run them. And so when you're in a position where you're doing continuous integration and continuous deployment, you're going to see this every build cycle. It's a matter of actually paying attention to it. And if something's been deprecated or if something has a high risk, one is evaluating how much it affects your organization. Like oftentimes what will happen with some of the front end frameworks is people will say like, oh, well, we have security on the back end, so we're not going to worry about it as much. And while I can agree that security on the back end is more important, you still should have a culture of making sure that things are up to date. And once you see that things are out of date, you have to triage, you have to prioritize, but start working to get those libraries replaced. Because one of the things that'll happen is this library was out of date, it was deprecated, and it wasn't an issue now, but now that we're trying to upgrade to Angular 17, that library doesn't work with the new Angular, and then it becomes a whole pain when you have to patch several different libraries or migrate several of them at a time. So you just want to start patching that early in the continuous integration and deployment pipeline. If you're not doing continuous integration deployment, if you're delivering, fully complete products, I would actually recommend is if they're going to be ran in any sort of public networked environment, unless you know that there are different considerations and different risks. If you're talking about something that's like you're working on a government contract and it's going to be used on a completely closed lab, a little bit different. If it's something that's going to be run on a game console that isn't networked, you don't have to worry as much. But if you're deploying software applications to a number of users that you're not going to be able to update at a future time, maybe minimize your external dependencies, because any libraries that you bring in, you're bringing in all of their vulnerabilities, all of their flaws as well, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it in the future. So know the code that is going into it. And that's way easier said than done. But I know I shared a story in our chat, but the PlayStation 4 was jailbroken because of a CVE that was preceded the release of the PlayStation 4 by 5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the details off the top of my head, but people are deploying things with libraries that already have known vulnerabilities. If you know that you're not going to be able to update the application at a later time, the least you could do is make sure that they don't have any current known vulnerabilities and try to minimize external dependencies where it's economically feasible to do so.
Well said. Thank you for that. We have a tool drop we can cover if you guys would like. So there's a recursive internet scanner for hackers. Nmap's good enough for me, but let's see what they've got cooking on GitHub here that is interesting enough that it has, for whatever reason, made the show notes. So this here is called Bbot from Black Lantern. This is a recursive internet scanner inspired by Spiderfoot, designed to be faster, more reliable, and friendlier to pen testers, bug bounty hunters, and developers. Sledge, have you ever used this tool as the
You got a link? I use Spiderfoot, and I also use another thing called WizQuas.
Yep, I got a link. It's
I don't see it.
It's over here.
Oh, is it in the?
I'm gonna pop
there
it
it
in
is.
our little private area that you can see.
I also use Spiderfoot for OSINT purposes. I'd like this as well if I could get my hands on it. Please and thank you. Dope. Thanks.
Big, huge BLS OSINT tool.
That's sick.
I love things that use graph theory, especially when they can combine it with like a command line on the side. That's really cool looking. I feel like I'm in a freaking Matrix movie over here with this thing, but looks pretty neat using graph theory. Maltego was probably the first OSINT tool I ever used that used graph theory. Really cool to be able to visualize the stuff that you see. Remember when I first started pen testing, one thing with Metasploit, it's great as like training wheels, so to speak. But when you go from like Metasploit, which is all command line, to like the GUI version of Metasploit, which is Armitage, and then the paid version of that Cobalt Strike,
Yep.
It's so interesting to actually have like a visualization of what's going on and not just have it all be console. So different people learn differently. I'm a visual learner, so I think tools like this are kind of cool when they're using graph theory. And looks like it's got a bunch of really interesting modules and some cool stuff that could be used. So this is just your weekly tool drop for those of us who are doing OSINT and pen testing.
For OSINT, I posted in another link. It's not free, but it's one of the best tools I've ever seen.
Was Quas?
Yeah,
Yeah, that platform's also pretty based.
it was awesome. We found
It
so
is.
much crap on my last engagement.
It is very awesome.
Well, unfortunately, I can't really show much of the tool because I don't particularly
Yeah, it's
have a
not
login
free.
for it.
I know Jimmy, he could probably hook us up, but nah.
Well, let's not say that out loud on the podcast. Then everybody's going to be reaching out to whoever Jimmy is and
Delete
asking
it.
for.
Delete that.
No, too late. It's in there.
Damn it.
You put it into the ledger of internet history.
I guess.
There.
Oh well.
All right. So next we have got. Let's go over here. There's a decent write-up from the Slack team on how they were able to catch people stealing cookies and log into other people's accounts. We're not going to go over that because that's a pretty long write-up, but if anybody is interested, I'm going to try to remember to post the show notes this time into the YouTube video later so you can go through, and if any of these are links that you'd like, click on the article as you do. Next we've got Microsoft Midnight Blizzard source code breach also impacting federal agencies. So the Department of Veterans Affairs and other agencies are seeing some of the potential impacts from Midnight Blizzard, the Russian hacking group's breach. The VA reported a brief unauthorized access to a test environment, and other agencies' data has been stolen as well. Hackers have also allegedly leaked Taylor Swift tickets to everybody on the internet who wants one.
Good.
This data breach involved over 166,000 barcodes valid for entry to upcoming Taylor Swift concerts. I wonder how they're going to deal with that. They're probably going to have to resend those ticket codes to all the people and tell them that their previous one is now invalid. I imagine that's going to be a logistical nightmare for people who might not get the update email or who have sold the tickets on other marketplaces.
If they went through Ticketmaster, that's going to be a problem anyway, because they probably, I don't know what they actually got from Ticketmaster, but I know it was a bad breach. So they could have gotten some of the black magic that Ticketmaster uses to make their tickets. Then what?
Indeed. I mean, they might have the ability to make their own tickets from now on and sell them. I wonder how that'll impact the revenue and bottom line for those people who put on concerts. And maybe it was not the best idea to only have two companies that can do ticketing and then make it one company, from an antitrust perspective. But I've never been a fan of Ticketmaster or Live Nation myself.
Their fees are ridiculous.
Same.
I agree. A friend put on a concert once. I think they wanted to charge $20 a ticket, and after Ticketmaster got involved, the cost was about $80 a ticket. It's insane. ChatGPT for Mac initially stored users' chat input in plain text. Well, that's not that big a deal because you need local access to access files on a Mac that are stored in plain text. The main issue here is if they're making these kind of coding mistakes on their clients for people's computers, what other coding mistakes might they have made when people are also uploading a lot of confidential information to this every day? So it's just
I wonder if they could be susceptible to what happened with the Signal desktop app when it first came out, or it was storing the key on the machine and people could get to it.
I was unaware of that. That's actually a good callback to something I was not familiar with.
Good times. Nobody used it for a long time until they fixed it.
There was something also with Signal in the handshake where there's an overflow there for a little while when you're initiating a phone call. They patched it out before I think any POC came out for it. There's a post here about BGP hijack and route leak that occurred on June 27th during the Cloudflare incident. If anybody's interested, we can cover that. And also, CISA has released a guide to help election officials improve operational security during elections. That's probably going to be interesting. Let's take a little look at that. What do you guys think of CISA anyway? I know they had some budget cuts lately, but they do seem to put out some pretty good guidance overall.
I like CISA. I like NIST. I think, some of their biggest criticisms come from places maybe not looking at how it applies to their specific organization. It's a lot of information, and it can sometimes be difficult to get to what is relevant to our organizational needs.
I've never dealt with the CISA stuff. I was always NIST and ISO and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, they put out the KEV, and the KEV is usually useful. You should, as a pen tester, maybe take a look at that every now and then. Known exploitables vulnerabilities catalog. That's, can be just as useful as using like search exploit, looking for exploits.
VoltDB, basically.
So it's just quite interesting that they're putting out election guidance here. I remember there was something with the last presidential election where the guy in charge, I believe it was CISA, got shit canned over making the claim that it was the most secure election in history in terms of cybersecurity.
Oh man, his name was. I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember his name to save my life.
Yeah. I think he had a same last name as the popular guy who writes InfoSec articles. Maybe Krebs or something like that. Like he had the same last name as one of those
Krebs
guys.
is the one that comes to mind when you say that.
There's a new update to the RockU word list. Not that the old one isn't still great.
Saw that
the
one.
RockU 24 word list now has 10 billion passwords in it.
If your password is in RockU, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
They do have connectors for AD that will check passwords against the word list if you specify one. So like if you were to specify the RockU 24 word list, if somebody tries to enter one of those passwords in, it will not let them set that as their password. It will tell them that doesn't meet the requirements. So that is one way.
That's pretty sick. That's pretty sick.
Yeah.
It was I think it was 8.1 billion for the last one. So we've jumped a good chunk, but still. Yeah, I was reading up on that earlier.
And I hope somebody went through and did
testing
on it to get or like dedupe it and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I just sort it and then sort unique. There you go.
Yep.
Cloudflare, we talked about that. 3 million iOS and Mac OS apps were exposed to a potent supply chain attack. A group of researchers discovered 3 vulnerabilities in CocoaPod's trunk server. The first vulnerability allowed attackers to social engineer pod developers by spoofing the XFH header while sending developers an email for authentication to generate a link to an attacker-controlled server. The second vulnerability allowed attackers to take over abandoned pods without proof of ownership, and the third allowed attackers to execute remote code on trunk servers with malicious MX records. I don't know what a CocoaPod trunk server is. Thomas, do you have any idea what that is? Sounds like a breakfast cereal to me.
What is CocoaPod?
Not every piece of software out there is one that I'm familiar with, and that's certainly one I'm not.
It may be an internally named
manager for Objective-C, Swift, and other languages that run on the C runtime, such as RubyMotion, that provides a standard format for managing external libraries.
There you go. The latest Intel CPU impacted by new indirector side channel attack. Researchers have discovered a new branch target injection vulnerability in Intel CPUs that could be used to steal sensitive information. The attack has 3 components. The iBranch locator uses prediction-based techniques to identify the indices and tags victim branches and determines the indirect branch predictor entries for them. Targeted injections are then performed against the prediction structures to perform speculative code execution, and then ASLR bypass makes the prediction and manipulation of flow control of protected processes easier. It reminds me of using the Mona script and finding like a jump ESV, and like going and writing into a DLL a little. Anyway, researchers reported their findings to Intel and recommend more aggressive use of indirect branch protection barrier and bolstering branch prediction unit design. Spectre was a bitch too. A lot of these CPU side channel attacks are just well, they're side channel attacks, meaning they're not likely going to get used like by a remote attacker. They could be under certain circumstances, but they do.
People that
decrease
find
the
those
overall.
have to be the smartest people in the world and also bored.
Yeah, I remember the dudes over at Red Balloon had a bunch of interns like going against an opened up Cisco router and looking for like little JTAG pinouts that were not populated and like trying to map out what did what and doing glitch attacks on those things and finding these kind of side channel attacks. They eventually found one in a Grandstream phone too. They're able to use it to get read write onto an ARM processor on it and used it to embed some software that'll let them a few years ago, they called it the Obama phone. Like is that they put a voice changer on the arm of the phone so that when everybody who'd hear each other, it would change everybody's voice to Obama using like shit. It was funny. It was just a demonstration of another tool that they make that like helps monitor low-level firmware stuff. Interesting.
Is there a write-up on
they
that?
do.
Because I'll go hunt one of those down.
There most certainly is. Ong usually does really good write-ups for the stuff he puts out. If you look Red Balloon and Obama phone in Google, you'll probably find it. I'm not going to look for it right now, but we can touch base offline. Twilio confirms a data breach. Twilio, for those of you who are unfamiliar, are where all those annoying text messages you get whenever you sign up for a mailing list come from. Twilio was hacked by shiny hunters, and they will leak 33 random phone numbers associated with Authy. Twilio has confirmed the breach. It reported the vulnerability was due to an unauthenticated endpoint and no systems were compromised. They secured that endpoint and are encouraging users to be vigilant against phishing and smishing attacks. Phishing, for those of you who know, is email. Smishing is text message attacks.
Vishing is voice.
There you go. We should make up some new ones and act like they've been around for a while and see how long it takes to catch on.
I mean, we have a platform.
Runtime, we should. We could disinfo the whole thing. We go to Disinformation Village at DEF CON and start spreading some rumors.
You didn't hear about XYZ? You should have been doing this the whole time.
It was on this podcast this one time.
So there's a new repo also in the tools section here called DNS Twist, and it's designed to help companies find lookalike domains that adversaries could use to attack their domain, or alternately could be used by a pen tester to find a lookalike domain that they could register for a phishing engagement.
I actually use that all the time.
Well, like a typo squatting platform?
You can type in
a
URL that you're trying to make really close to register the domain for, and that'll find different variations of it, and then you could from there see if it's available or not.
So like a typo squat.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, all right. It just finds typo squats for you. That's pretty sick.
Yep. Here's a little demo.
Ah, my computer's going insane. Come on. What are you doing?
That's neat. Yeah, it finds. That's exactly what it does. That's pretty nice.
That's pretty cool. It's always good to learn new tools. Just don't get too dependent on your tools. Learn other ways to do things other than the way your tools do them. It's always fun
Also-
if you find a really nice tool that you like to try and recode it, maybe in a different language that you're more familiar with, or play around with it, trying to add some features to it doesn't have, and contribute that back to the community.
Also, don't go full tilt on a tool or a platform you don't completely understand, because you will break something or yourself.
And don't roll your own encryption. Or do, and make our jobs a bit easier. Fileless elf exec is a Python script that generates interpreted code, which creates this supplied ELF. ELF, for those of you who don't know, is a Linux binary format as a file in memory and then execute it. This makes it possible to execute binaries without leaving a trace on disk if you're a pen tester. Now, Sledge, can you explain to those who are not pen testers? Oh, Sledge disappeared and is back now.
Yeah, he's coming.
My computer had a stroke.
At least it wasn't you who had the stroke.
Mhm.
I was mentioning a tool called Fileless Elf Exec. It's
I
a
was
Python
just
script.
looking at that. That's pretty cool.
So, as a pen tester, why would it be important to not leave a trace on disk?
It makes it harder to detect. So this is kind of why we like using Mimikatz. So you don't have to touch disk. You can use everything in memory.
But boy, is it loud!
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Boy, is
especially if you
it
do a
loud!
DC sync. Hopefully, they have rules for it.
I'm always curious on the blue team side of how you would actually go about detecting something like responder.
So,
Nope.
I can answer that, but crowd, you can't.
No, I've tried. If you have an answer, please, all yours.
Some of the rules that we've got detect certain parts of what responder does. If you're using the flag to toss up, LLM and R is the basic one for that. And if you're, instead of using responder, you're using the new one, Sledge Pretender. If you're using the DNS flag, it will catch like the rogue DHCP server that gets set up. We have there are some rules out there that monitor broadcast for repeat requests and mismatches, but those are really
Okay.
noisy and need a lot of tuning. I don't recommend you ever push those to production without like spending a month tuning them first. I've made that mistake, but there's stuff out there that can catch responder. There are some good detection rules if you know where to look. And you and I can sync offline, and I can show you some examples of ones I've deployed if you want. If you don't have that in your environment.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, hit me, please, for sure.
The people who make Proton Mail, which is the successor to LavaBit for encrypted email,
Oh yeah.
those people also have a VPN product, and now to add to their product suite, they've also got an Office suite.
Huh.
Yeah, so you can do Google Docs type collaboration on Proton. Personally, I still recommend the self-hosted route with like OwnCloud or something similar. Nextcloud, OwnCloud, any of the ones that let you do that kind of stuff if you secure it properly. But this looks like a pretty cool alternative to having to set up your own infrastructure if you really want a secure way to collaborate. Might be useful for pen testers and the like. And we've got a new Golang-based botnet capable of powerful DDoS attacks. This one's called Zergica. I think I pronounced that right too, maybe. And like any botnet, it can launch a powerful DDoS attack and has this one actually has advanced capabilities like proxying and reverse shells. Written in Golang, uses DNS over HTTPS like Iodine does for communication with its C2. And the botnet's actively targeting Canada, Germany, and the US with different attack methods. We also got a ransomware group called Malix, active since 2021, targeting Linux systems using Python scripts for payloads.
That's not something you see every day. That's neat.
Yeah, this new
Usually
variant
target Windows.
Yeah, and Windows is the biggest target, really. But Linux boxes that are poorly secured out there, a lot of crypto jacking and later on buying access to them from like initial access brokers is
Hmm.
popular. I know if you go on one of the marketplaces out there, if I can remember the name of this one, I will appreciate it. Come on, brain. Regardless, I had to solve a really complicated captcha to get into this one. It was like literally differential equations, which I didn't know how to do, and that was their captcha. And once I got in order to access one of the markets, you had to actually give them like Bitcoin just to get in before you could even like post or look at what was there. But this initial access broker was really interesting because they did have a specific section just for Linux compromised hosts, and it was broken down in such a way where it was ones that are like on a company network as opposed to ones that are in a VPS like DigitalOcean, and what kind of website was running on them and what kind of access they got, whether it was if the privilege escalation was still needed. And it was really interesting to see the way the threat actors kind of not only sell the access that they get from scripts like this, but also who buys it and what they then use it for. So it's always interesting to kind of go under the hood and figure out where this stuff goes when people compromise it. And it's really surprising, it was at least to me, that a lot of the times the people who do the initial compromise are not the same threat actors who are then going to do a ransomware attack. It's separate groups,
Right.
and they sell access from one to the other. Protocol tunneling came out. There was some stuff about that. This was a threat insight talking a little bit about techniques that can be used to encapsulate one network protocol over another. There was also some write-ups about SSH tunneling not long ago, perhaps even this week, earlier in the notes. Regardless of your methodology of tunneling, it's really important to not get caught if you're trying to do things as a well. I should rephrase that. Depending on what kind of testing you're doing, you might want to get caught. It could be part of your methodology, where once you've gotten what you want as a tester, you want to get caught, right, Sledge? Maybe like Jason
Sometimes,
talks
yeah.
about with FISEC testing.
I'm curious what they mean by tunneling. Do they mean SSH over something or something over SSH?
So this particular one, they're talking about, I don't know if we have access to the article. Let's see if I got it. Nope, no access to the article. But regardless, there's different types of tunneling. Like you've done the Cyber Flummer's Handbook. You can tunnel pretty much anything you want over SSH if you know what you're doing.
Yep.
But there's like tunnels within tunnels. There's DNS tunneling, so over like port 53. Iodine is really good for that. I've used it on airplanes to bypass captive
Yeah.
gateways and get on the internet when I could ping a host but couldn't get to anything except, there's lots of cool stuff you can do when you know how to tunnel well. Malware also is using tunneling, to communicate. Oftentimes we'll now see threat actors using Discord. There was an emoji botnet with Discord not long ago. It was interesting where the threat actors were literally control the botnet with emojis from the Discord side, which I thought was retarded, but also funny at the same time. There's a lot of really novel things going on. But I think we kind of run through the articles I wanted to cover. And we got a little bit more time to shoot the shit if you guys want, or we can end. It's up to you.
I'm down for whatever.
Whatever.
We've gone
All
on over 2 hours. I don't know. What is
think,
the average time?
Well, it's as long as we make it, man. But I think we've covered a lot for today. So with that being said, I'd say we end it now. It's a good point. Right, guys?
Works for me.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching. We appreciate you all, whether you're watching now or on a rebroadcast. You have a wonderful day, and that is all. Goodbye. Peace and chicken grease.
To the sound waves, secrets of the dark maze, dark codes in the nighttime, information aligned. We're free in the spotlight, chatting through the late night. Smart contracts are lying, auditing, they're defying. Counters feel in my ear. Security we engineer. Learn the truth, don't disappear. Counters feel we're right here. Crypto dreams and data streams. Listen close, it's closer than it seems. Fix the flaws, see through the smog. Counter serve will join the blog. Information overflow. What we read.
I really got to get a video to go here that I can put up rather than how awkwardly looking at each other as this plays.
I was just thinking I would totally just like headbang. Like, I'll take my hair down. I gotta ask it, man. I'm here for this. All right. Yeah.
Dreams and data streams. Listen close, it's closer than it seems. Fix the flaws, see through the smog. Counter serve will join the blog.